Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast, a podcast where we look at each other's faces on a webcam and talk to each other from one country to another, and it's all just wonderful. My name's Michael Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Magic.
And this week we is talking about art. Doesn't get much grander than that, in my opinion.
Doesn't really.
I think there's lots of different kinds of art to discuss, and there's sort of our perception of other people's work and possibly even our own, feelings about the creation of art. Have you got any headings?
I had something about access to art, the sort of consumption of art, the weird pressure put on people to be confident in their opinions or not, or to understand what they're supposed to like.
Yes.
How hard it can be for somebody to make a living doing art, how important art is to us as humans.
Yes.
How much we need it.
Yes, and this is
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and this is a two-parter, and we know this up front this time.
Up front, yeah.
So, yeah, like lots of subjects. So let's go. Let's do it.
Go.
It's been a few days since we last checked in. How are you, Ivanka? How's it going?
I am. Well, my back's bad, so therefore I've been quite miserable. But I don't know if because I was a bit miserable, my back went. So I don't know. Anyway, it makes me stop still and take stock of my existence and go on lots of long, gentle walks. So that's what I'm doing. So we're not recording our podcast in the morning as we often do, but rather from lunchtime, which has given me time to mobilise my aching body. And how are you, Michael?
Been doing a lot of travelling. 6 flights in 2 weeks, which my carbon footprint is a disgrace at the moment. So after Oslo, I went to my brother's wedding in Spain, which was very nice and warm, and we stayed in a nice hotel there, and that was all right. We went to Jerez.
Is that how they all say it?
Well, Jerez, I guess, which was very cheap compared to Oslo, I'll tell you that much, and also very interesting to be in a place where every available surface wasn't plastered in ads, in advertising. The only thing you really saw as you walked through was the occasional sort of mosaic of Mary or a painting of like religious
Is it
stuff.
quite holy?
Well, I don't think it's holy. I just think they're into religious stuff there, and not much else. Even the supermarket, there was nothing on the outside of it, just like a sign kind of above the door and nothing else, even though there's this huge supermarket. They're just not bothered yet. It was quite nice to sort of be somewhere that wasn't all about having stuff pushed in your face. And then I was in Berlin this week to sort of kick off a contract. I haven't been back to Berlin since I lived there, and I just had a weird experience with it, just going, do I love this place or do I hate it? It was this weird combination of my expectations being low, but then like weird stuff just being way better than other places, and not least of which was like the music shops there, the synth. I went into the synth shops, Schneider's Lad, and I didn't make it in the whole time I was living there, partly because it sort of opens at 2 p.m. on certain days of the week, sort of closes like not long after that, and you kind of have to go into a sort of residential looking bit and then the shop's in there. But yeah, I finally made it in there on my way back to the airport, and it was like I keep thinking about it. I just keep thinking about it. Just like all the modular synths with just out, and you can play with them.
Was it like Michael's toy shop?
It was
Michael's
like a toy
dream
shop. It's on my mind. Not that but then sometimes I'm like, well, I've got kind of a bit of a dream set of synths and stuff behind me as it is, but I probably don't spend much time on them, not as much as I probably could. But yeah, so I just been travelling, just been knackered, and then I helped my sister move house. Her new place is on the 4th floor, and which is just shit.
So you got your steps in yesterday?
I got more than enough steps. I burnt about 1,000 calories doing exercise yesterday. So I had like 2.5 hours on my bike, an hour at the gym, hours carrying shit up and down stairs. So I'm just like aching today. And I just want to lie down and just not do anything. But no, we have to talk about art.
We do.
But that's good because I'm kind of up for this chat.
I've had the opposite of your mega carbon footprint couple of weeks because I've been to a children's eco something on a Saturday morning. It was as part of EU Mobility Week. The Sutivan, which is a tiny little town, village, organised for all the kids to go on and, like, you know, bring your scooter, bicycle, whatever wheels you've got. And we wheeled off to this other beach, which is a little bit too far away for my child, but she got most of the way there, and then I put her on the back of my bicycle. We joined in, which was, you know, already quite hard for me. Because I sort of like joining in, but I don't know anybody. But so what they'd done is as part of that, they had the Eco Bunny, which was a green bunny that my child wasn't sure about at all. This green bunny
a person in
didn't
a
want to
suit?
go. Yeah, she didn't want to go near the green bunny. But they had games organised where they had to pick up, you know, they compete to pick up paper, to pick up glass, to pick up. So sort of teaching them about recycling, and it was a day out, you know, sort of 4 or 5 hour activity, which was quite cool. We joined in. Okay. She was a bit small, but we did our best. And then the other day, I told you I was making these clay balls filled with microorganisms. I have done some Googling since. The jury's out on whether effectively doing things like putting probiotics in the sea is going to do anything. However,
sort of like,
it's clearly a very nice community activity and makes people talk about the cleanliness of the sea, which sometimes these things, they're certainly not going to do any harm.
It's going to fill it with balls.
Clay balls. Basically, they're clay balls with. I don't know if you're how into composting you are, Michael, but you can buy compost activator, which has good bacteria in it. It kind of looked like compost activator. But, you know, I scored points in the local community for going along to this volunteering activity. Okay. And, it was a sunny day. I've been saving the sea for you.
Excellent.
As you
the
fly
hubris
above
of man. The hubris of humanity. What we'll do, let's do everything we're doing, but we'll chuck some like clay balls in, see how that goes. Yogurt. Here, have some yogurt. See.
Basically, that's what it is. Here, yogurt, have some sea. No, here, sea, have some yogurt. But, you know, it's nice to be in a place that's actually looking at things to do.
Yes.
So rather than not doing anything, which is...
I shall reserve my... I don't know what could possibly be big enough for me to actually... If they were nanotech balls, then you'd be talking. I mean, in a way, they are... I watched a good YouTube video yesterday about how they're finding sort of lots of drugs in the sea, all kinds of new molecules all the time.
Oh, really?
It's funny how nature does sort of seem to provide these chemicals that you either sort of take something that in normal doses would be highly poisonous in a very tiny dose, and it can kind of cure you of something or relax muscles or do things, or there's these compounds that sort of coincidentally cause these effects in human beings. And then, you know, so something that might be a defense mechanism for a stationary organism attached to a rock maybe can sort of fight cancer in humans because they have an interest in stopping rapid cell growth in organisms near to them. You know, it's very strange.
Well,
and just that all of the life is under the sea. Very little of it is outside the sea, isn't it?
Yeah. Often when we choose a topic, I go to my Facebook feed and find that serendipitously something appears in my Facebook feed that is relevant. Perhaps it is the algorithms spying on us.
Reading your brain.
Or it's just the fact that I'm noticing these things because I'm thinking about the topic that's coming up.
I will, just on the subject of Facebook, notice that the scandal this week being that Facebook is using phone numbers from two-factor authentication for ad targeting. Cool move, guys. Thanks. That's not a betrayal of trust or anything.
They're using phone number authentication for AdWords targeting.
Just that, yeah. So they're sort of like the stuff that's for security they're using for their marketing, which
Pretty
pretty
cheeky,
cheeky,
aren't they?
Yeah, not on.
Yeah, no. So then this week I watched a video. I have mentioned this in passing before on a different episode, where this school that was out of in special measures introduced music and it improved massively. But anyway, the BBC covered the school and there was this very lovely video of it was a failing school in Bradford. Some very high percentage of the kids in the school, English was an additional language for those children, possibly not even their second language, but maybe their third or fourth. And each child now has a minimum of something like 8 hours of music a week.
8? Wow.
8 hours of music. So as opposed to ditching music, because I think East Sussex or Brighton Council have killed the whole music. Like I at school did, we all did the recorder, and then I did the tenor horn, and then I did all these different, my sister went through, the double bass, all sorts of things, because if you wanted to do it, it was there and available. Anyway, they've killed that. But but this headmaster was talking about how much it's improved. It's improved the kids' performance across all subjects, but especially maths and English, which are the ones that everyone always measures. And the kids were being interviewed, and they were talking just about how much more they enjoyed school.
Yeah,
and I think that is not to be underestimated. And I think, my starting position on art is more that we have needs that are beyond the basic survival, the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy. To see something beautiful, to read something beautiful, is a real need for human beings. That sort of emotional food.
it's true, and I wonder if, when you start thinking about, the fully automated luxury capitalism, communism scenario, same, still automated and luxury. You have to pay for the capital one. That sort of like future, like when humans don't have to do any of the boring stuff. Then sure, art becomes the most important thing. And I think it goes beyond sort of entertainment and beauty, but it's also like a way of understanding the world and in a more holistic way, and in a maybe a sort of less kind of nuts and bolts kind of way.
Yeah, and beauty is definitely part of it. Also, it's this sort of emotional response. When I was thinking about the podcast ahead of time, I was thinking, do we need to define art, or do we need to talk about the different art forms? And I'm not really that bothered about that, because I think it is interesting as well, having a small child and watching her respond to different types of music, because with her there's no pressure to like something because you're supposed to like it. Or I read she's got some Spike Milligan poems, and I've started reading them to her, and she just listened to one of them and went, that's funny, but she didn't actually laugh. It's just kind of but there's that sort of, art gets this big fat label that's all, like you said in the beginning, got this grandioseness attached to it. That am I supposed to like this, or am I supposed to not like this bit? And I think anything that you have an emotional reaction to or makes you think is art. It doesn't have to be high art, whatever that is.
I don't know what that is.
No.
So something from a conversation with our mutual friend / foe. Historically, a lot of art has been in the service of religion, has been an attempt to access and explain, and the patrons of the arts were generally the church, and the idea was to try and access something larger than us and present it in a way that could inspire that awe, and it had a lot of utility to it in terms of kind of managing a populace, if nothing else, but it had a focus. And in a way, I kind of miss that I mean, in the modern world and art's place in it, where it is all about, there's a lot of it's about self-expression now. And I've always struggled with that as being valid. I'm not sure. I think this idea that this individualistic approach to art, where as long as you're expressing yourself, then that's fine. But you're not necessarily trying to say anything about anything larger than yourself. And yeah, this is something I struggle with a bit.
Those of us who can't paint or draw or play a musical instrument or do these things that are the tools of expressing art can be very impressed and moved by the skill without necessarily engaging with the content or considering it. So I recall being at the Tate Modern and seeing a Jackson Pollock for the first time, expecting to think it was nonsense, because it's my engineering self. So it's just splashed paint all over the place. But actually, I found myself quite engrossed with it. I remember feeling this feeling of enjoying looking at it, wanting to look at it. And I think one of the things I have learned or did learn from our mutual friend stroke foe is that I am allowed to have an emotional reaction to a piece of artwork without any judgment, without caring whether I'm supposed to like it or not. If respond to it emotionally first and then have a think about the other connotations. One of the reasons people struggle to talk about art, even if it's music, it takes a long time to go, well, I like it. This is my, even pop music.
You have to be given permission.
Yeah, by that sort of peer pressure or your tribe or whoever it is to go, it's okay. It doesn't make it uncool if you like this. Or it does, but why would you care? Apart from thinking about the need to experience art and the need to be, there's also, having done projects in places like Abu Dhabi and Dubai, where there really isn't a visible presence of the same kind of art that we have in Europe. In fact, really, Abu Dhabi and Dubai are all about shows of wealth and dominance over nature. And there is a society that's really, my impression of it is that you go there to earn a tax-free living, and there are these, there's no society to speak of. There's these layers of various expats. Everyone's an expat apart from a very privileged few. And it depends what flavour of expat you are, how much you're earning and what kind of job you have. But there is nothing being fed back into the society. And I think without the society element, art doesn't work. It is part of the glue that a healthy society, a healthy community, a healthy group of people have. They have artists, they have dances, they have music, they have things that reflect them as well as. So, and I think when you don't have a healthy society, art suffers. Yeah.
And this was definitely felt like the difference between Oslo and Dubai couldn't be more different, really, just in terms of their approach to wealth. And I had it a bit in Hong Kong seemed, I was like, there isn't art that I can really see in the same way that, and even if you sort of tried to go to the area that maybe was supposed to have a little bit of it, it was still like, Whereas, the nicest places in a city are often, the life is expressed in terms of this kind of public or...
Yeah, and I don't healthy. When I say healthy society, I don't necessarily mean wealthy, because often in times of hardship or like political turmoil, one hopes that in these times of political turmoil, at least some decent art should come out of it. And I mean all art forms, movies, books, protest songs. I don't know, because if you're not in that. If there's something going on in society that needs, people need galvanising around, then art is a powerful, very powerful medium. Yeah. As we've discussed in the media episode, if you start, talking about TV as an art form, not just as a, news reporting mechanism, it suddenly has a great deal of impact on society and a great opportunity to teach people stuff or make them think about things.
I recorded a song recently. So this is about kind of the personal / the defense of personal art. I realized is it can't just be individualistic. It has to be, there is a problem that me and people around me are facing that needs to be expressed, that people can rally around. So I sort of took some inspiration from sort of like how hip hop works. And I was like, there's a lot of sort of like, I mean, for want of a better word, complaining about your lot in life in some of these tracks. So if it's good enough for hip hop, then maybe I can try it in my song and just kind of describe my experience, sort of like directly. And then, so I recorded a whole song. I had sort of plans for it. And then kind of had it shot down, and then my kind of understanding of that, my thinking about it now, I'm like, it is too specific when it's just about me and my particular life. Maybe I'll find like 5 or 6 people, 50, 60 people in the world that can empathize or kind of like want to learn from that. But it's not really the same as a kind of social uprising that people can get behind, like Public Enemy might have kind of been in support of. So it's not enough for it just to be a personal expression. It needs to be an expression of something that lots of people experience. And this is also, I think, a more general, certainly around music. I think music is like, the meaning of music is closer to people singing in church or at a football match than it is to some guy twiddling knobs on his own on a stage in front of 6 bored-looking hipsters, which is kind of the other side of the coin. But for me, as someone who is tends to produce stuff more of the latter type, it's I don't know, like, and when I haven't really found my I haven't got a religion to express. I haven't got a football team to care. I don't care about that sort of thing. But I haven't found my kind of cause that the art needs to get behind. But yeah, I'm not really trying to talk about me. I'm just trying to sort of say something I learned through doing it, which is how I learn everything, was like personal individualism is one thing, but really at all levels, if it's not kind of representing something shared by lots of people, or at least enough people, then I don't know what value it has. It becomes this thing that I often kind of say, which is this sort of like anything goes. Oh, I've done this, and it may or may not have required any skill, and often doesn't require that much skill either. Where people sort of like, they turn up, they sort of feel cool for being there. And I do this. I turn up to gigs. I turn up to sort of these sort of independent shows and things. And I'm like, okay, well, I sort of feel cool that I'm here. All of this work is pretty, I don't know. I can find something about it probably that I can take away, but I'm having to look. But at the end of the day, I'm probably going to forget about it pretty quickly.
Are you talking about the consumption or the participation?
No, I'm talking about consumption more in that sense.
Do you think we need to talk about the actual act of creation? So regardless of topic, or maybe, and I don't know, with music sometimes, if I'm playing the instrument, am I still an artist? Or if I'm singing the song that someone else has written, I don't know. I think I am, because whatever happens, I'm going to be putting my own self into it. Because for me, I definitely talked about this before. It's like I got forced to play the accordion as a child. and I had lessons for years, and I did all my practicing under duress until the day where I just was in a really foul mood, and I picked up my accordion and played just for me. And I was able to lift my own mood by playing an instrument. I don't know, in that context, I never considered myself any sort of an artist. I was very capable of reading music and reproducing it on the accordion, but I couldn't. Most of the people I played with in the orchestra could hear a piece of music and play it. They were far more, I don't know, whatever, talented. They were far more able, capable. I don't know, but there's that sort of art for myself. So the writing music about something that happened to you, for you, regardless of how many people are going to listen to it, I think has value.
There's that feeling you get where I can sort of sit in front of a piano and I can play it to myself, and I can be, or a guitar or anything really, and just be profoundly grateful that this is just for me. This is something that I can just kind of create from nothing, and that's a great feeling. I'm just kind of like conjuring stuff from nowhere, and it's having an emotional effect on me, and that's a nice feeling to have. But if you're talking about like wanting to stratify levels of artists, then I mean the usual one is, I used to have this conversation with my band years ago. It's like, is it art or is it craft? And I personally, I've sort of gone off that. I don't know about that as a distinction, but the idea being, like, you can get good at the skill of creating something, but is it art unless there's originality to it, or you're sort of like creating something new somehow, or you're pushing the boundaries. But then actually, if you kind of take the whole idea of creativity back to its core, nothing is truly original. Everything is being influenced by, there's always a tradition. And if you try to be too original, you end up not really having the emotional impact, because to express something, you need to be trading off against expectations, which means that you need to be coming from some sort of tradition or some sort of, musical scale, or like set of instruments, or kind of like conventions, so that people can have that. There's this difference between, I'm just going to try something completely crazy versus I'm just going to push the envelope just enough that it excites people but doesn't sort of scare them off. And then what you're talking about a little bit is, where does performance sit in with all of that? And if it's whether or not it's something that you wrote, are you an artist if you play other people's stuff? It wouldn't be my first. I wouldn't immediately think of a performer, a violinist, as an artist in the same way that I think about Jackson Pollock, because it feels like a slightly different thing. But really, I think these are all fairly arbitrary divisions.
Yes, so, I mean, there are certain performances of art that are not required to they are required to have originality. So if you think about your classical pianist, or somebody who's a famous pianist, famous violin player, whatever, they are still putting their own style, something. There'll be something in there that's theirs. And I think with things like art forms like dance, a lot of it is choreographed. So who's the artist? I don't think it matters at all. I just think that it's when you've been taught that art is something that you need a mysterious art Babelfish to tell you whether or not you're allowed to like it or not, or whether it's within your remit to understand or whatever. Because art has this thing where it should really be really inclusive.
There's a lot of nonsense around that kind of like,
and lots of nonsense,
tribalism, and kind of exclusion.
And it's that sort of like, exactly. Lots of excluding people, and this kind of music is not for you, or, we're very special and we listen to this sort of things, or we understand these painters, or we understand these writers, which is surely not the intention, not important to art. I don't know, if Titian was painting something, did he only want boring art historians on telly to be talking about his paintings? As I understand it, when he was painting his pictures, that was what you went to look at, regardless of your social status.
Well, there's that sort of like critical versus popular appeal, and in an ideal world, you'll get both. And often it sort of seems like a trade-off for something that lots of people will like versus something that the critics who know a bit about the medium will kind of be able to spot like what you're doing too easily. They'll be like, what are you doing?
What you were talking about earlier about sort of the hip hop music where the story represents many people. There are many examples of comedy music where people join in with it because it is that sort of all-encompassing. Loads of comedians that become very popular tell stories of things. I walked into a shop and then this person looked at me and everyone's like, yeah, I feel that like that too. And it's kind of, there's, it's not clever plays on words or anything. It's just describing life in all its absurdity, and that does make you laugh, and then that person becomes very popular.
Well, it helps you connect to realise that you're not alone when someone can point out something that you thought was a personal experience.
It is that sort of recognising yourself in something. But conversely, there are many examples of art that people simply don't get exposed to because the power of the people who bring it to us. So I was listening to Malcolm Gladwell. I re-listened. I went to check the story to make sure I'd remembered it properly. But he talked about this woman, Elizabeth Thompson, who'd painted a painting called Roll Call 100 years ago, at a time when women were not allowed to do fine art. They were not, this is not something women were supposed to do. And at the Royal Academy of Art's annual show, they put it in a popular place. It got seen, it got covered, but she never became a member. And they got caught, but it was like she went off, got married, had 6 children, never got a mention again, even though she had this critically acclaimed painting that got traipsed around England with, people, it was like people queuing round the block to go and see this painting. But the Royal Academy was so powerful that if they didn't feel comfortable having a female member, then next year's show, they just shoved her in her painting in a back room. Nobody saw it, and she just forgot about her. Just because something doesn't become popular or doesn't have loads of listens or doesn't make loads of money and doesn't even get critically reviewed and acclaimed, does it make it any less good? Like, how are you measuring the goodness of art? If you write something and 10 people are moved to tears or moved to laugh, is that enough?
When I think about like music in the 70s, 70s, 80s, even like 90s, when it was big business and it felt like there was a lot more variety and a lot more interesting, stuff going on in a lot of ways. And you get the Velvet Underground and you get Captain Beefheart. And I've always kind of lamented the fact that these artists don't come out just fully formed making stuff to that quality. They are spotted and nurtured and sort of like developed, and they work with very experienced people to get their sort of craft up to a certain level. So it's like you're sort of sculpting that kind of, okay, this is someone that's got something to say. This is going to be interesting, but like, let's just, make sure you're not doing these silly mistakes, or let's make sure that this stuff's a bit tidier, or this stuff like is not a bit too long, because no one's perfect. No one's going to just come out of the womb fully formed. They need a bit of help. But now the climate is like, no one's going to risk spending money on something unless it's sort of in a very tried and tested mold. So what you get is a very, like, the stuff that is selected to be, this is going to be the pop music, and it's gone through X Factor, and it's gone through all these kind of controls that we're going to spend loads of money on and, like, make sure that it's to a certain, and I'm talking about music, to a certain, and then you're going to get, like, these kind of world-class producers kind of polishing it and doing these things to it, but it's going to tend to be in this sort of tried and tested mold because they sort of feel like, well, okay, I know I can sell this. But then at the other end, you just get a load of stuff that is, in terms of saying something, a lot more interesting, but kind of suspect, and I put my own work in this category, like in terms of the craft and like, because there's no mentorship, there's no, I'm personally on this permanent quest to kind of get someone to help me to kind of get to the next level of craft.
But what you're talking about, though, is that art's only purpose is to make money. And that is not its purpose.
But art takes time and effort. Like compared to sort of a day job, it's much more intense. It's much more difficult. And it often kind of takes a lot of money being spent on it. Art doesn't get made for free.
No.
So I guess I'm talking about the fact that like it's hard to kind of disconnect getting paid for something with, like, I know in an ideal world we would all just make art and it wouldn't be a thing, but you can't just do that because you need.
But I'm not talking about not being paid for your work. I'm talking about the fact that most of these decisions that most of the things you're talking about, they're not going to take a punt on somebody who's a bit risky because they don't want to, they're not going to make any money. People don't want to just cover their costs. They want to make a load of money.
Yes.
So they'll only take a punt on somebody they think is going to make them shitloads of money. And that is what I'm talking. That is not the purpose of art.
But I'm just saying, like, I feel like this didn't seem to be such the case when music was a bit less of a kind of...
No, because people were happy to make a living.
But also, like, MP3s, like the internet, all these things that have made it harder and harder to actually sell. Like, so you sort of go back in time and it's sort of the performer is the medium as much as the artist, right? Like, here's a song and here's the performer. So, like, the performer is in the room and able to say, okay, well, you can get my dinner. Like, the performer and the medium aren't disconnected.
Yeah, Mozart used to have to show up with his harpsichord and play some music, and everyone went, "Oh, bravo, bravo!"
or whatever.
Here's some money. Here's some dinner.
And then, sort of the medium became more and more disconnected from the actual, the artist, and so now everyone sort of expects these pristine recordings that simultaneously can just make their way anywhere with no intervention from anyone, and hence, sort of getting paid or getting any value from that as the person who originated it is a lot more difficult. But then I suppose you could argue that, you're not having to go out every day and perform it either. So, why should you get millions of pounds for this?
Yeah,
like, you've kind of spent 2 weeks in a studio and here it is, like
forever.
So and that's music, but the film industry, TV, that they're all kind of feeling that. And this isn't an interesting or original point to be making, but I guess just like artists get paid, but then like art has always been a privileged activity. So that's why I kind of feel like, well, why can't we move society to a level where everyone gets to do this privileged activity? We don't have to pretend it's anything else. And I think beautiful things would come out of that as well, because you'd get like a lot of kind of ideas and feelings kind of mixing in a wider thing. But then you'd also get this kind of saturation of there's too much to possibly consume. So I don't know. I
mean, there is at the moment too much music to consume. Yeah. And too much telly and too much movie, and it's just there. It's all there. All the music that was ever made is on your Spotify, and you can't possibly listen to all of it in your lifetime, never mind anything else. It's hard to discover new stuff because it's just easier and safer to go to the things or the genres you think or whatever it is. So I think, yes, there's been this massive shift, but I don't think that changes the human need for art. No. And I think that what you're talking about, if you take there's no concept of patronage anymore, or, don't get this.
That's arguable. I mean, I think one of the more interesting things that's emerged has been Patreon, which
yes, but who knows who doesn't make music?
No, lots of people.
Patreon is if you watch
bubble. YouTube, well, okay, but
isn't it?
So, if you're not in the digital bubble, then you're probably buying CDs still. So it's
I listen to Spotify all the time. It's the only reason I know about Patreon and I listen to podcasts is because is via podcasts, not YouTube videos. Most of the YouTube stuff I stumble upon has got ads on it. No one ever asked me. It's like you have to be. I still think it's a niche. It's not cultural. It's not in our culture to go, I enjoyed that. Here's some money. That's why people don't give money to open source projects very easily, or crowdfunding. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but this Patreon is an interesting new implementation, but I don't think it's gone mainstream yet. It's like nobody's listening to, I don't know, some tune on the radio going, really enjoy that. I'm going to go to their Patreon and give them a 10p. The culture has not caught up with the technology and the ability to make things en masse really easily. And concerts cost a fortune. They're not like little, this is a big. I look at it, Elton John's doing a gig in Hove Cricket Ground, and I think the cheapest ticket is 90 quid. That's a lot of money.
Well,
Who's going
very
to that?
much at the kind of peak of the pyramid, though. So, like a lot of, we're looking for solutions to, and I don't know. I have this two things, which is, like I said before, like art is traditionally kind of a privilege, or it has to have some sort of function to the state or the church or whatever religious things. It's never been something that everyone can do, and it's not necessarily even something that everyone should do, but there's nothing we value more than the art that affects us. I don't think in this world. I mean, there's relationships and there's art. The counter side that I was trying to get across about there being too much media to consume is the tail of it is so long and so low quality that you can click through SoundCloud at random for hours before you find anything that's not kind of just... It's the sound of the software that was used to make it, kind of the default settings sort of thing, that you're not going to get anything out of. And then the people that are doing something interesting, it will often sound a bit kind of lo-fi compared to professionally produced music. So it can be more interesting, but then it can just sort of sound bad on your speakers. Yeah. And that's quite common as well. So really to sort of get to that level, that it's still very rarefied, the stuff that we do have wider access to. And it sort of seems, I guess, like there's quite a lot. But like you look at, I mean, we're focusing on music, but if you do look at like charts, pop charts, it's the same 8 people kind of over and over again for years on end. And then half of the other stuff, I got sick of 6 music because it's all like 90s indie, whatever, still. And I mean, maybe that's just the stuff I register because it's the stuff I'm familiar with. But it just seems like we've got this long tail versus this kind of rut of kind of like rehashing the same sort of things over and over again because people are scared. I mean, don't get me wrong, it works. And actually, like with music, a lot of it is just you kind of scoop up the 13-year-olds as they come through that don't know like the history of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I don't know. There's a frustration about not getting paid for something, but it's like no one's ever got paid for this, really. Maybe performers got paid in the past. And they, if you can find a way to be able to perform it, then you can get paid. But, I don't know. Like art is... It's a privilege to be able to do it at the end of the day.
Listening to new music, going to see new art, going to see a movie that is outside of your normal genre, these are scary activities. Nobody would call them scary because that seems like an extreme word, but you might have your tastes examined. You might have to ask yourself some difficult questions. You might have to, it might connect with something in you emotionally that you're not ready to have connected with. It's like listening to, if I listen to music that I know that I am thinking of the 1,000 other times I listened to that piece of music and the people I've listened to it with and the places I've been. It becomes much, much more than simply the piece of music. It's the same with looking at, the paintings that we have in the wall in our houses. They're there now. In that moment, it said something. I bought it. I put it on my wall. Well, I'm not going to get rid of it now, and therefore I'm not making room for new art to come in because this is my art. This is what represents me.
Also, we understand things through we have a frame of reference for understanding something. So for instance, Coen Brothers films, like my experience has been like every other one I sort of didn't like the first time I saw it, but then I'll love it the second time. And half the time that's because structurally it's just not the normal structure of a film. So you just don't really know what you're looking at. And then it's sort of finished and you're like, oh, what? And then the second time you watch it, you know kind of the shape of it. So it's a lot safer to do the sort of 3-act structure of, the sort of protagonist gets thrown out of their comfort zone and then the meeting with the thing. And the normal structure, you kind of know what you're dealing with then and you can enjoy it the first time. But when something expects you to sort of modify the very lens through which you're looking at it, it's going to be hard to enjoy it the first time.
Well, totally. And they're asking for a big commitment from you, aren't they? They're asking you to give them not, hour and a half, 2.5 hours. They're asking for 5 hours because you've got to watch it twice. Well, you've got to think, And I think that's important. And I think, I did a lot of my new music discovery when I worked at LBI because there's people around me whose taste I trusted. They go, listen to this. Oh, okay, I will. And I will listen to it twice because if you say it's good, I trust you. I'll give it a couple of goes for it to become familiar so that I can enjoy it. There is something...
I don't know how much of any music anyone likes the first time. You have to, a lot of it is through repeated exposure. So that's what radio kind of plays you a song a couple of times. I don't think anyone sort of falls in love with something the first time they hear it.
No, I think you get those like the Date Rape song, which have that little boppy thing where you kind of can't help but kind of go bop, bop, bop without actually engaging with what it's doing or saying.
There is stuff that so I was thinking about David Lynch then as well. The first time I saw Eraserhead, I was in the first couple of minutes I was like, what is this bullshit? And then after another 2 or 3 minutes I was sucked in. I was like, this has overcome my skepticism, doing something that really weird and unusual. But if you can sort of get into someone's bones if you can sort of bypass that conscious thing somehow, as while you're doing your thing in this unusual way, I mean, that's, to me, these are the artists that I kind of put up on a pedestal at the end of the day. That is the ones that can, on the first look, bring you into something that you're scared of. But then does that mean I have to put Date Rape song in that same category? Probably. But then sometimes the stuff that seems nice the first listen and then 10 listens in that it's not giving you anything. And it's just horrible. You want to be kind of aware of the difference between that and something that's actually, good.
Well, I think I shy away from movies, for example, in paintings that have my definition of horrible content. I prefer not to be confronted by horribleness unless I have to be. So I don't really like that feeling of, oh my, that is so disgusting. But equally, we've spoken about...
I'm not talking about disgusting. I'm just more talking about being disturbed by something that's different.
The disturbing, is the wrong word. I think disgusting I can deal with because that's your sort of rubbish movie with a load of blood in it. Isn't that sort of gore versus the something that makes you go, oh, that is just a step too far for me. That is making me think about scenarios I don't want to think about. That's making me, whatever it might be. And I think this is the need for art in our life, is to escape our day-to-day as well. It shouldn't have to be reaffirming it, but rather to go, whoa, what about looking at the world through this lens? Whoo!
It's fine to be I recognise that. And that's the thing. I recognize that experience. I'm now comfortable. Is a different thing to, oh, here is a way of looking at things that I hadn't considered, and it kind of opens me up to a lot more possibilities.
That bit of it, though, is the bit that's hard work, and you need to be braver to do.
And that's why someone like, what's his face, Northern comedian, Peter Kay, his whole thing, he fills stadiums and all he basically does is, hey, do you remember this thing? Yeah, I remember that. Do you remember this other thing? Yeah, I remember that. And that's it. It's just, here is some familiarity that it's just like you might have forgotten about.
But it doesn't, it doesn't make you laugh any less. It's just that it doesn't make you think. And I think that's the bit.
Well, I think once you're onto it, you're like, yeah, okay, every single joke has been, do you remember flying saucers? Right, can you do something else now?
Well, I did quite enjoy his car share thing. Just because it was just like sitting in a car.
This is one of those things I feel confident, just in the same way that we feel confident in like appreciating something based on other people. Like I can diss Peter Kay because I know that lots of comedians that I respect have done this publicly already. So it's sort of like he's sort of like safe ground to me. Whereas I would probably find it more difficult to dismiss someone that I hadn't heard someone else dismiss.
But, compare him to, I don't know, the person that comes to my mind as somebody who's the antithesis is Stuart Lee. And oh God. But so much of him, I watch him and I can understand that it's funny, but it doesn't make me laugh.
Stuart Lee, he's so kind of, in his what is comedy, what can I get away with? I don't know, like he's so about like the structure and the art form of being a comedian that I just can't. I've had enough of him because I feel like he's not actually there to make me laugh anymore. And he does a bit, but then when he starts doing this, I'm going to see how many times I can repeat the same thing. I just sorry, Stuart. Like it is partly on you. I feel like it's your job to write jokes as a comedian. I don't feel like it's your job to dissect the art form publicly in a way that challenges everyone. And and maybe I am laughing at a lot of it still, but I'm still waiting for the bits where he's actually done a bit of work rather than he's like sort of. I think it's when the repetition comes in that I really start to go, look, stop.
I mean,
I actually saw Mark Maron, his last comedy special. He did a bit of that. I was like, don't go down that path because it's more for you than for me,
but a lot of the Stuart Lee obviously was a trigger word. But he does. So my other go-to, which I don't know if there's anyone like that around at the moment, is somebody like Spike Milligan, whose art is his comedy is so abstract that it's just ludicrous and funny. But equally,
Harry Hill is the more recent one. Just a legend, just absolutely brilliant. Someone that can sit on ITV and still be just like biting and just brilliant. Without hurting anyone.
But that's true. I hadn't thought it. He's not so on my radar as. But I'm still stuck in some sort of other world of 50, comedy that was written 100 years ago. I was like, oh.
Well, I don't know who the Spike Milligan. I don't know who the current one is because Harry Hill's not
exactly.
Much in the mainstream. Well, he's from like a long time ago now, even.
But I do like watching. So there's comedy is an interesting art form.
I think Harry Hill is the David Lynch of comedy.
Wow.
When it comes to something new that you're not familiar with, if you're not, in your teens and it's all new.
Yeah.
I guess you are at the whim of the critics. Like if the critics like something, then you're more likely to put the time in More like you'll check, you'll see. Has this film got like, I think Nick's,
Yes.
has it got more than 7.5 on IMDb?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll give it an hour, like
Yeah.
an hour and a half. This is how it is now. Like it's either stuff that is just so mass marketed at you that you've got no choice but to see it a couple of times, or you go through the critics. And these are people that we expect to have more sophisticated ways of looking at things than we have personally, and hence can sort of we can now find people who we think we're going to more or less agree with their opinions, on the new film that just came out, the new song, the new whatever. And then we hope that through them we can filter the stuff that's interesting. Film criticism is one thing, because there's not too many films to be able to watch most of them. I think certainly not sort of features that have got distribution. But when it comes to music, like it really is a marketing exercise. All of this is it's like, but then it always has been. It's like here's my new record, and a bag of Coke was the way that you used to get stuff on the radio and kind of reviewed.
There's just by the very nature of it, there's more of it. Without somebody filtering it for you and telling you what you're supposed to be listening to, it's nigh on impossible. You have to dedicate, like you just said, you have to click around SoundCloud for some hours before you find something that you actually want to listen to. I can't give SoundCloud that amount of time. I can't give music that amount of time. When I can sit with my 3-year-old and put on Grooves in the Heart by D-Light, and the first 3 seconds she's already started dancing the first time she heard it.
And that was me. Like that was nearly the first single I ever bought as well. Yeah. Actually, the first thing I bought was the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles soundtrack. So whatever. But so I'm a bit annoyed that I didn't go with my first. But I feel like there's something about the A&R process in the past where stuff like that is just objectively, I don't know, not as objectively as anything like this can have a level of polish and a level of kind of like, there's not stuff. It's just like, okay, this is a finished piece of work. I think there does exist a sort of quality in any art form that can allow you to get sucked in by it on the first listen or the first viewing. And those are the artists that I kind of like hold up at the absolute, with the highest regard. So if David Lynch can kind of get me through my skepticism about like nonsense and into something and enjoy it, or if I can see that Grooves in the Heart the first time on Top of the Pops and just be instantly captivated by it, I think that is the stuff that's the stuff that you want. The world now it feels like there isn't really an engine, there isn't really a machine kind of creating that sort of stuff in the same way. But then could just be old, and our tastes are formed when we're 13. Let's wrap up part 1 and do our bits, shall we?
Yes, let's.
So thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like it, go to grandpodcast.com. You can find me at michaelforrestmusic.com. And where can we find you, Ivanka?
You can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
And what can people do to help?
What would be lovely is if you would subscribe, get all your friends to subscribe, write us a little review on iTunes. That always helps. And YouTube, wherever you listen, Stitcher, YouTube, I don't know, Spotify. Give us some stars, please. That would be lovely.
Whatever rating system is available, please
use it.
Click those little buttons. Be lovely. You can also contact us, hello@grandpodcast.com, if you have any thoughts, and we will do our best to respond, possibly in an episode, but we still don't get much stuff, so you're likely to get a response.
We're not drowning in correspondence.
Yeah, it's true. We are very far from drowning. We're, if anything, we barely got any up our nose yet, any water up our nose, email wise. But yeah, thanks very much for listening, and I hope you'll come and tune in next week. Bye.